All right. Thank you, everyone. Good to see you again. I'm James Hare from this morning. And today I will be talking to you about Wikidata, and I will be talking to you about the software that Wikidata runs on and how you can use the software that Wikidata runs on to create your own similar interoperable databases as part of building an even bigger graph database of the world around us.
Just a little bit.
So to introduce myself, I am James Hare. I am a freelance data developer and consultant. I have a small business with a few clients. I work in collaboration with other companies like Wikitech and with other wiki consultants to build solutions for the problems that their clients are having. A lot of my work revolves around basically taking the baseline Wikidata experience and just building more on top of it, whether it's more useful tools for it or just more data, right? The idea being that we have Wikipedia as our baseline, Wikidata as our baseline, but there is so much more that we can be doing. And my role is in enabling that kind of work. And so what is Wikibase then? So if you're in this room, you're familiar with MediaWiki, and you're likely familiar with the semantic MediaWiki, which is a collection of extensions on top of regular MediaWiki. So regular MediaWiki is like a document management system, and then semantic MediaWiki is adding facts with meaning behind those pages. Wikibase is an alternative way of doing something similar. It's not exactly the same as semantic MediaWiki. It's actually a different solution. But what it does is that it enables you to build, it basically has its own built-in ontology, its own built-in data model, not in a detailed sense, but in a very low-level sense. And then you build your own flexible ontology on top of that. And one of the cool advantages of Wikibase above other pieces of software that do similar things of other graph databases is that it doesn't try to box you into a rigid format. It doesn't try to prescribe the world to you. Rather, it is designed in such a way that, if your data has exceptions, you could add qualifiers, you could add references. And there isn't an assumption that a statement is inherently true. They are just claims, and so it is meant to turn the kind of content you would find in Wikipedia, which is nuanced. It has lots of different positions presented. It has references so that you can associate the individual fact with its provenance. Where was I going with that? So yeah, and so if you want to, for example, say that a dog is a mayor of a town, it will allow you to do that. Whether other derivative systems you build know how to account for that, that's kind of on you. But Wikibase is perfectly happy to handle it. And so this is an individual claim here. And so you can see on the left you have the property, and so every statement on Wikibase, more or less, is you have a property, you have the item, it's on a property about that item, and then its value. And then value, you could have qualifiers, you could have references, you could have ranks, you could have a bunch of things. But basically, in this case, the property is director. The value is Brian Epstein. Start time 1960, 1967. And those are the qualifiers to that particular value. And there's reference that provides attestation to that fact. Does anyone know which Wikidata item this is?
Yes, the Beatles.
Yes. This presentation is based on a presentation I did last year, so it is not the same, but it is quite similar. So you may wonder we have Wikibase, but other than like its features and its support for MediaWiki, why else would you use it? And I find that a lot of the interest in Wikibase comes from the use on Wikidata. They see the large open database that Wikidata has built going even beyond the scope of Wikipedia to include other forms of knowledge that can be represented in a structured format. A more egalitarian system that is not as concerned with, is something prominent enough to be included? It's much easier for something to be included. The structure of the project lends itself to the proliferation of many, many items, which can then be interconnected with other items. And you sort of create more information out of that than you had before. And so Wikidata is a pretty darn cool project. I think one of the coolest things about it is that because the data underneath is represented in a language neutral way, all you need is some way of representing the fact, and then you put human language labels on top of the fact. And so as long as you have the fact encoded in some way, you can instantly represent it in hundreds of languages. Like, for example, this here is from the same Beatles item. This was what was on the last slide, I think. I can't read Chinese, so I'm not sure. But the idea is that, what you see in English, just change the language to Chinese. The English labels are replaced with Chinese labels. So it's not someone going in and translating page by page. It's someone translating the individual concepts as identified with a language neutral identifier. And another really promising thing about Wikidata is that it's sort of a universal app backend, right? It may not necessarily contain all the data for your project, but for example, if you are, if you're building an app and you need, some baseline data, like a list of cities or list of medications, no idea why that would come to mind. Then you put the data in Wikidata, and then you can look it up over its APIs, and not just APIs, but full Sparkle queries as well, full semantic queries where you can ask specific detailed questions and get answers. And so on the left here, you have a screenshot of something called Gov Directory, which seeks to create an open directory of all the government agencies, services in the world. And on the right, you could see the Wikidata entry. The Swedish Medical Products Agency is referenced there on the left. And so if you want to very quickly bootstrap an app of data, you can just build it on top of Wikidata, and rather than have to build out that data set yourself, you have something you can already use. And so you have Wikidata and you have Wikibase, and you have this very large and interesting project with Wikidata. And so you think, you have all this data, why not just put it into Wikidata? And one of the issues here is that Wikidata is a volunteer community, right? It's a volunteer project, and people are dedicating their free time to it, like Wikipedia, right? And the nature of the network effects, there are network effects when growing a startup, or network effects when socializing something for the first time. Also network effects with the growth of Wikidata. And so Wikidata became really big really quickly. And yet the size of the community, or the ability of the software to efficiently allow users to keep up with the inflow of data, it's led to the Wikidata community asking serious questions about what they want their scope to be. Because they are at over 100 million entries, and the core community has sort of tapered off. It's sort of grew to a point. I think it's now at its peak carrying capacity. And so the way I'm inclined to think of it is, rather than have Wikidata be a centralized database, rather than put everything in there, think of it more as decentralized and allow for the growth of other databases that are then interconnected using this common Wikibase ontology. And so I've taken this as a sort of, I've taken the limits of Wikidata as an opportunity to take initiative and figure out what other Wikibases we can build to grow this Wikidata ecosystem. We're going to go kind of like how we have MediaWiki Plus, we should also have a Wikidata Plus. And so I'd like to discuss the 4 Wikibase projects I'm currently in charge of running, varying degrees of activity and varying degrees of importance to my day-to-day work. But I view these as the sort of beginnings of a larger Wikibase federation. So first you have something that's very straight and functional, the Internet Domains Wikibase, which I host on a free Wikibase hosting service called Wikibase Cloud. It is operated by Wikimedia Germany, which is the organization that originally developed Wikidata and Wikibase. And so I use the Internet Domains Wikibase for a couple of clients of mine, and its function is to track domain names, specifically domain names. And where this need came up is that, in theory, a domain name is an identifier for a resource, right? CNN.com is CNN, like obviously. But the problem is, so those who work in semantic web stuff understand and deal with the distinction between URLs and URIs on a day-to-day basis. I think most people on this planet don't, though. And so, you could just think of these abstractly as identifiers without concern for resolution. But in practice, these are resolving addresses. And domain names are not so much names, so much as home addresses. And you could have a house at a home address, but the tenant leaves and a new one comes in. And so I created this Wikibase so that I can keep track of these changes, and so that and the secondary use is that a lot of databases about source reliability, how reliable a given source on the internet is, tend to identify these sources by domain name. So if I have a database built on domain names, I could easily add that data on top of this. So Internet Domains Wikibase just, it just mainly identifies domain names and the organizations they're associated with. And the reason this is interesting, it's funny, I created this project in 2023, and for the longest time I struggled to come up with a really good and compelling example of domain names changing in meaning over time. Then one really high profile example just conveniently landed in my lap one day, and so I just went with it. So probably the single most valuable domain name on planet Earth, x.com, supposedly purchased for over $1 million from PayPal in sometime in the past. Let's see if this laser pointer is really good. So yeah, in the past, this x.com domain was associated with this other product. I think this is x.com, which is a sort of predecessor service. I forget what it did. I think it was payment processing or something like that. This was the original meaning of x.com, 1999 to 2000. And then starting on July 24th, 2023, the associated product, publication, or entity is Q918, which is Twitter, what we used to call Twitter. That's one example, but imagine, for example, Examiner.com is another example. It used to belong to one news publication called Examiner, now it belongs to a different publication called Examiner, and they are very different publications from each other. And so that's I think more urgent use of this kind of database to be able to distinguish between those things. And so, as we're building out these Wikibases, we have Wikidata, we have mine, there are others people are working on. I figured, what if we had a place to keep track of all of these? So I created Wikibase World to be the sort of interchange of all the Wikibases, right? You have Wikidata and the other Wikibases, and then you have another Wikibase that links out to all the other Wikibases. And this is what I would like to have as the core of our future federation. And this one is a bit less purpose-driven and more function-driven, right? There are some instances, I would say a lot of instances, where you don't quite want to put data on Wikidata, but you don't want to spin up an entire new Wikibase either. And so I operate this as a sort of queue item as a service. Mm-hmm. If you want to create just several Wikibase items, create an identifier for something that didn't have an identifier before, this is your platform to do it. The rules are basically don't harm others, and I'm allowed to delete things if I think you're spamming. And if you're wondering if this is actually used for anything, yes. It's a little esoteric, but one thing I like to use it for is tracking templates across wikis, not just across Wikimedia, because Wikimedia does that themselves, but Wikimedia and other non-Wikimedia wikis. And so it's a sort of meta template tracker. And I have some other niche uses like that as well in mind. and perhaps now my most ambitious project. Years ago, I had an idea of creating a database of bibliographic metadata called LibraryBase, and I shifted those efforts to Wikidata instead. And one of the reasons Wikidata has grown to as large a size as it has is that it's taken on this entire sub-project of tracking scholarly literature as metadata and building an open citation network between these articles. Because before, if you wanted citation graph information about journal articles, you would have to go to a proprietary database, and there was no real good open solution to this. But now there is, and the project is kind of obsolete, and Wikidata is full of these articles, and people are kind of frustrated. So my thinking is, okay, I don't want us bibliographic metadata people to be on bad terms with Wikidata. So I'm thinking, what if we had a purpose-built Wikibase that just does bibliographic metadata, and we can go as far as we want? My vision is to grow a Wikibase that is as large as Wikidata, if not larger, to capture not only sources that are cited on Wikipedia, but could be cited on Wikipedia or shouldn't be cited on Wikipedia. Really anything that is in a collection in a library anywhere. Like, we don't have this open card catalog for the literature in the world that we should. And this is the open platform I've created for it. And one particular reason for LibraryBase to exist is not just to be yet another ISBN, yet another DOI, but to have a platform to assign those kinds of standard identifiers to works that didn't have them before. Like for example, a local community library, with zines and handwritten books, things like that. They don't have standard identifiers. They are not treated as equal citizens of books with ISBNs, and so LibraryBase is a much more egalitarian way of assigning identifiers to those kinds of works, because there is no gatekeeper saying what is and isn't allowed. And so as I'm building out this ambitious Wikibase ecosystem, I think LibraryBase represents not only just a database building challenge, but a technical challenge as well, being able to have those kinds of databases without the resources the Wikimedia Foundation has. And I will say that the progress I've made is that I have 2 Blazegraph servers running the Wikidata query service, and they're load balanced with each other. And operating that kind of query service for a data set as large as Wikidata is, I think, the single largest technical challenge. And if I've taken on that challenge and am so far succeeding, I think the other things are just a matter of getting them done. And it's a matter of making the time available. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions you have. If you want your own Wikibase for your own projects, or you want to build on top of Wikidata, extend it, build on top of the Wikipedia ecosystem in general, I'd be happy to talk, and I'm happy to take any questions you have right now.
Is it, strange question, but would it be reasonable to say that every patient who has a page of the longitudinal health summary, that is a mini publication?
Sure.
It doesn't really fit into the ISBN culture. Could that have a unique identifier such that when professionals want to write an article, they could reference Tanya or James or someone else?
I mean, yeah, I think you could, I think a similar idea, rather than using Wikibase to create a metadata record about a book, a metadata record about an album, a metadata record about a movie, it's a metadata record about a person and their health history. And there are all sorts of when I think about databases of people, I think of all sorts of privacy questions, but I think in concept, you could use Wikibase to create sort of unique identifiers for people. And the nice thing about that is, whether they have a social security number, whether they have the Canadian social insurance number, whatever they have, you could use Wikibase as the sort of neutral ground for that person, so that you are uniquely identifying that person and not their twin sister or their cousin or someone with the same name who's completely unrelated.
That's a great answer. I just have a comment, which is not everyone has a social security number in the US. Newborns who have a history may not be given a social security number for years. And so there's a need to go beyond a SSN, and the idea of having every patient in the US having their own unique identifier for whatever privacy and security and other issues has not come to fruition. Though I think it would be valuable to be able to identify a single person, everybody,
Yes.
without having official. This is the sort of the de facto solution.
And say Scott?
Yeah, so can you talk about links and deduplication? So as continuing your example, right? There is like a .name DNS. This ties together a couple of your examples. There's a .name DNS, I think, which is supposed to identify a specific person with a domain name record, right? Suppose you had a Wikibase instance which allowed vanity QIDs for people. I sign up because I'm interested, and I say I'm cscott.name or whatever, and I'm Q, my favorite number at your Wikibase, and then something happens, and I become, and for example, it gets linked to my selfie, right? Yeah. Then something happens, I win the Nobel Prize, and suddenly I'm notable enough for Wikidata. Like, what happens then? Can Wikidata use that existing entry?
Conceptually, yes, since the data would probably be in the public domain, so they could probably just slurp it up. But I think the first thing they would do is they would create an item, and then they would say, and this person is also this person in this other Wikibase. And Wikidata has so many properties for identifiers in other databases, then they're very easy to get approved. So I think the starting point would be the item linking back to the other item, saying, as a conceptual ground, we refer back to this other database. And whatever other items of data people want to include is whatever they include.
This seems to complicate search though now, because now if I'm looking for some information about me, I have to follow all these links to say, this is also this thing on the other site, and that might have a different property name for the same thing I'm looking up. And
right. Actually, one of the goals of Wikibase World is to create a sort of central listing of all the different analogous properties. Like, there's a property called exact match, and there's an item on Wikibase World, or a property rather, and it links to all the other properties on all the other Wikibases. And so I think as part of building out these Wikibases is being able to cross-reference them with each other, and I think Wikibase World will be central to that. Daniel?
We have time.
One more question.
I've poked around with Wikidata a little, and you mentioned external identifiers. You can say on Wikibase instance, whatever, this person is also that identifier. Can Wikibase also pull in the data that is included there? For example, if for some reason I become notable and have an entry on the real Wikidata, which is unlikely. And that links to your instance and says on James Harris, whatever, IFQ892.
Right.
Can it then also show, and based on that, my date of birth is this, and my address is, and all of I'm assuming not address, but can it pull in data from other Wikibase sites?
Wikidata would not automatically do that. It's just not set up to do that, but you could build an app that pulls data from Wikidata, then looks at the other identifiers, then pulls from those databases as well.